In the quiet dark of space, the Othan Confederacy's research vessel Lucent Dawn moved slowly through the edge of a forgotten star system. The crew, peaceful scientists and explorers, had spent months scanning dead worlds, logging ancient stardust, and following faint signals left behind by long-lost civilization. Most signals led to silence, wreckage, or ice-covered tombs, but this one was different. A steady pulse, repeating every 23 seconds, had been picked up by their long-range receivers. It wasn't encrypted, it wasn't coded in any known language, and it didn't carry any hostile tone. Just a soft, almost tired electronic heartbeat coming from a system marked as empty on every known chart. Curious, and a little uneasy, the crew decided to follow IT.as. They arrived near the small gray planet known only by its old survey code Eden 9. A strange feeling washed over the bridge. The planet spun slowly below them, wrapped in thick clouds, hiding its secrets beneath storms and shadows. There were no signs of cities, no warm lights, no energy fields, yet the signal was stronger now, louder, and strangely clear. They ran scans across the surface, expecting perhaps a broken probe or a crashed drone, but instead they found something far more disturbing, a network of half-buried structures, sharp edges poking through ash-covered ground, like bones from a forgotten war. Some were clearly buildings, others machines, and some shapes they couldn't even identify. The ruins looked ancient, but the metal was strangely resistant to corrosion, and deeper scans showed activity faint but real coming from underneath the surface. Captain Noro, a calm and thoughtful Othani with pale blue skin and deep silver eyes, ordered a more focused scan. What came back made the crew stare in stunned silence. Buried under layers of ash, stone, and steel, there was a cryopod. Still active. Inside, it was a human. The pod's data tag had survived, though barely readable. It displayed a name, Lieutenant Commander Alara Miles, Terran Expeditionary Corps. No records in the Othan archives showed any living human presence in this sector, let alone a named officer. The Terrans, according to most known galactic histories, had vanished from deep space exploration over 2 centuries ago. Some claimed they had withdrawn after disasters. Others whispered of wars they lost. But all agreed no new Terran signals had been received in over 180 years. Now, one of them had been found. Alive, the decision to retrieve the pod was not made lightly. The Othani were a gentle people, skilled in science and diplomacy, but unfamiliar with military relics or deep survival protocols. Still, the moral weight of discovery pressed on them. If she had survived all this time, sealed beneath a dead planet, her story could hold answers to countless questions. What happened to humanity? Why had they disappeared? And what had happened here? As they brought the pod aboard and moved it to a secure medical chamber, the lights in the bay flickered. Not from power failure, but from the pod itself. Its systems responded to the ship's power field like a waking creature, sensing light for the first time in ages. The sensors showed her life signs slowly strengthening. Heartbeat steady. Neural activity rising. She was waking up. Technicians stood behind shields. Medics prepped emergency treatments. Captain Noro watched from the observation window, unsure what they had just brought into their world. No one spoke loudly. No one made jokes anymore. A cold, quiet sense of anticipation filled the room, thick as smoke. And then her eyes opened, sharp brown, and blazing with confusion, awareness, and something else, something the Othani did not know how to name. She sat up quickly, faster than expected, her breath controlled, her muscles tense. She scanned the room in one motion, like a predator cataloging a battlefield. The medics tried to speak to her gently, using calm tones, peaceful words. She responded only with a question, her voice cracked but clear. What year is it? They told her. 4521, Galactic Standard. She went still, no tears. No panic. Just silence. Her shoulders lowered slightly, as if she were preparing for something far heavier than shock. Then she whispered, so we lost contact. That's why no one came over the next hours. Alara Miles was stabilized. The ship's AI learned enough of her language to begin proper translation. She didn't speak much, but when she did, Her words felt weighted with things the Othani could only guess at places she'd seen, dangers she'd faced, names that no longer existed. She asked if Earth still communicated with deep space. They said no Terran signal had been heard in 2 centuries. She wasn't surprised. She began to share pieces of her story. Her ship had been part of a long-range colonization fleet. The Terrans had reached this system searching for a place to build, to grow, to expand their reach in peace. Eden 9 had seemed promising at first, rich in minerals, shielded from solar storms, with deep caverns that offered natural shelter. But there had been something else in the system. Something they didn't understand. She spoke of shadows in space, of signals that mimicked friendly voices, of machines that moved like ghosts, erasing colonies without a trace. They had tried to fight back. They had tried to warn others. But one by one, the human outposts vanished. She was part of the last defense unit sent to destroy the signal relays that the enemy was using. She completed her mission but was wounded. Her team gone, her ship destroyed. She crawled into the cryopod and set a timed beacon. It wasn't a call for help, she said. It was a warning. Captain Neuro listened carefully, heart tightening. The crew, once excited by the discovery, now looked uneasy. This was no ordinary survivor. This was a soldier from a forgotten war, one they didn't even know had happened. Then, the ship's alarms triggered. A proximity alert. Small at first, then growing. An object entering the system from deep space. Not on any known registry. No communication. Just motion. Cold and straight. Alara stood, weak but focused. She looked at the display. Her jaw clenched. "You need to leave," she said. "Now." That signal. It was never meant for you. It wasn't a cry for rescue. She pointed at the approaching object on the screen, her voice low but clear. It was bait. And then, all across the ship, the lights dimmed again this time, not from the pod. Something had noticed them. Something had arrived. Alara Miles had been asleep for over 200 years, but the moment she opened her eyes, it was clear she had not forgotten how to survive. Her body may have been weak from the long cryosleep, but her mind was sharp, focused, and filled with memories that the Othani crew could not even begin to imagine. They had hoped to find an explorer, maybe a historian or diplomat from the ancient human days, but instead, they had awakened a soldier, one who had seen things that no one believed still existed in the modern galaxy. As Alara sat upright in the medical bay of the lucent dawn, surrounded by strange yet gentle alien faces, she scanned the room not with wonder, but with calculation. She took in the layout, the exits, the technology, and the weapons if there were any, and her every movement felt like it came from someone who expected an attack at any moment. Captain Noro, watching from the observation deck above, felt a cold tension begin to spread through the ship. This human, lost in time and space, did not speak like a victim, and did not behave like someone in need of rescue. She was calm but serious, polite but distant, and her voice held the weight of someone who had lived through something that should not have been real. When she finally stood, ignoring the medic's warnings to rest, she walked through the halls of the ship with a steady gaze, asking for updates, maps, and sensor logs. The Othani crew, unsure how to respond, followed her lead, slowly realizing that Alara was not just another passenger. She was assuming command without even saying it. She asked about the object entering the system, the one that had triggered the alert just hours after her awakening, and when shown its pattern and speed, her face changed in a way that made even the bravest technician step back. She whispered something under her breath, then turned to Captain Noro and said clearly, "They're testing if anyone responds. If they detect your energy readings, more will come." The crew looked at one another in confusion, unsure who they were, but Alara offered no comfort. She asked for access to the ship's database, and over the next few hours, she reviewed everything: current star maps, political structures, galactic peace laws, and fleet movements. What shocked her most wasn't what had changed, it was what hadn't. Humanity had vanished from the stars, yes, but no one had ever found out why. The enemy that destroyed her people had left no trace. It was as if history itself had been erased. "They didn't just attack us," she said to Noro quietly in the briefing room. "They silenced us." Every outpost, every ship, every signal, they made it disappear like it never existed. That's why no one remembers. You think we vanished, but we were erased. Captain Nuro, who had spent his life exploring ancient ruins and dead stars, felt something deep and unfamiliar stir in his chest. Fear. Alara then asked to be taken to the cryopod again, not out of nostalgia, but because she had hidden something there, a personal data core, encoded with field logs, old combat scans, and a map of the last human defense line. It was damaged, but not destroyed. With the help of the ship's AI, she began decoding it, showing the crew images that none of them had ever seen: Terran battle armor, scorched colony domes, and dark, unnatural ships that moved without heat or light. One image showed a Terran cruiser being swallowed whole by something shaped like a living shadow. Another showed cities blinking out of existence as if wiped clean from reality. The Othani scientists tried to explain it away: natural disasters, energy anomalies, corrupted data, but Alora simply looked at them and said, "You've never fought a species that hunts memory itself." Her words were strange, almost poetic, but her eyes held no poetry, only truth. That night, the lucent dawn drifted quietly above Eden 9, trying to appear as dead and quiet as the planet below, but deep inside, the ship felt alive with tension. The crew moved in hushed tones, watching every motion on the sensors, and many avoided looking at Alara for too long. She carried herself with the poise of a leader, but also with the weight of someone who had buried entire crews. She didn't eat much, didn't rest, and when asked why she wasn't afraid, she simply replied, "I've already died once. I'm just here to finish what we started." Then, without warning, the approaching object changed course. It accelerated suddenly, heading not for the planet but directly toward the lucent dawn. Panic rippled through the crew. Shields were raised. Engines prepared for emergency jump. But Alara stopped them. "That's what it wants," she said. "If you run, they tag you. They follow your trail, and they don't stop. But if you fight back, if you make them bleed, they hesitate." The crew had never bled anything before, let alone made a creature hesitate. Still, something in Alara's voice made them listen. She began preparing a defense plan, not using advanced weapons, but by rerouting power signatures, mimicking debris fields, and using Eden 9's atmospheric static to hide the ship's presence. It was clever, desperate, and oddly creative. She didn't just think like a soldier, she thought like someone who had once fought alone. And survived. Hours passed. The object entered orbit, silent and invisible to the eye, but Alara tracked it through faint gravity disturbances. She pointed to a spot in the sky and whispered. Then, suddenly, it stopped moving. It hung there for long minutes, scanning, then vanished. Not jumped, vanished, like a shadow slipping under a door. The crew let out breath they didn't know they were holding. But Alara remained still. "This was only a probe," she said. "Now it will report. And if they decide we're worth the effort, they'll send more." She looked at the Othani bridge crew, who stared back with wide, fearful eyes. "You wanted to find out what happened to humanity," she said. "Now you're part of the answer." Then she turned and walked toward the ship's engineering deck, already planning the next step because in her mind, the war had never ended. And now, with the Othani by her side, it was just beginning again. The next 3 days passed in a strange silence aboard the lucent dawn, a silence that didn't feel peaceful, but instead sharp and cold, like the air just before a storm. Alara Miles did not sleep. Instead, she moved through the halls of the Othani ship like a shadow with purpose, working with engineers, studying energy patterns, and repairing old human tech she had brought from the cryopod. The Othani crew, still unsure how to process the weight of her presence, began to see her less as a relic from the past, and more as a leader built from something harder than time. She spoke little but never wasted words. When she gave advice, it was direct, and always about survival. When she gave warnings, no one questioned them. Deep in the ship's command deck, the senior crew watched as sensor logs began to pick up new anomalies near the edges of the system: weak pulses of dark energy, echoes that didn't match any known ship drives, and flickers of gravity where nothing should be. Alara stood behind the captain's chair, silent as the data rolled in, her face steady, but her fists clenched at her sides. "They're mapping us," she said softly. "It's how they hunt. They send scouts to study your response, how fast you run, what you fire, what shields you use." Then the real storm comes. Captain Noro tried to remain calm, but his crew had never faced war, and now they were drifting above a cursed world with a human ghost who spoke of enemies that erased history. The scientists had stopped debating her story. The evidence was growing. Strange signals now filled their comms, short bursts of static shaped like whispers, voices mimicking crew members who weren't speaking, and sudden images flickering across monitors, images from Alara's corrupted data core, things no one had uploaded. Alara warned them not to speak back to the voices, not to answer signals they didn't start. "They copy you," she explained. "They take your voice, your shape, and use it against you." That's how the first colonies fell. They trusted familiar signals. Then they opened their doors to monsters. On the fourth day, the sky above Eden 9 changed. The stars began to fade, not from clouds or dust, but as if the darkness itself was moving. A thick wall of shadow appeared beyond the system's edge, stretching like black ink across the void. It wasn't a ship or a fleet, it was more like a curtain, silent and cold, blocking starlight as it crept closer. The crew stared in silence, horror growing in their eyes. One of the Othani engineers whispered, "It's like space itself is bleeding." Alora didn't look away. "That's them," she said. "That's how they come. No heat, no light, just gravity and silence. They don't talk. They don't reason. They only erase." The ship's alarms remained silent. Whatever approached wasn't setting off normal threat systems. It was as if the galaxy itself didn't know how to warn them. Captain Noro gave orders to prepare for evasive maneuvers, but Alara stopped him. "If you run, they'll track your energy trail across systems. You'll bring them to your homeworlds. You have one choice now: fight here or die elsewhere." She then revealed something she hadn't told them yet. Inside the cryopod with her had been a failsafe, a hidden human beacon built as a last resort. It could send a burst signal strong enough to reach old human fallback stations, if any still existed. But using it came with a price. "If we use it, they'll hear it too," she said. "They'll know we're still out here and they'll come in force." Captain Noro asked the question no one else dared. "Do you believe any humans are left to hear it?" Alara looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I don't know," she said. "But if anyone is left, they'll answer. Because they'll know what this signal means." As the dark mass in space grew closer, the lucent dawn descended into the upper atmosphere of Eden 9, using the planet's violent weather and heavy ash clouds to hide. The crew began converting the old mining arrays below into sensor disruptors, masking their presence. Alara helped position them, guiding the crew through terrain she had once defended long ago. As they worked, they discovered old Terran ruins half buried under the ash defense platforms, collapsed bunkers, even bones still inside suits of armor. Some Othani froze in place at the sight, understanding now that this was not a story. This was a graveyard, and they were standing in the middle of it. That night, strange sounds echoed across the skies of Eden 9. Not wind, not thunder, but voices. Human voices. But the speakers were long dead. The crew heard their own names whispered back to them in their sleep, followed by cries, screams, and laughter. Communications were cut, and Alara ordered every unsecured device shut down. "They're trying to break your mind," she said. "They want panic." That's always the first stage. Then came the tremors. The planet, long quiet, began to shake. From deep under the surface, something was rising, not from the humans, not from the Othani, but from the forgotten war that had once taken place. Old machines, buried long ago, powered by human desperation and sealed with last commands, had been triggered by Alara's presence. From hidden silos, giant defense drones began to crawl to life, blinking red eyes, creaking metal, and forgotten voices echoing activation protocols. Alara approached one of the massive walkers, placed her hand on the control panel, and entered her old command code. The machine paused, scanned her face, then opened with a low hiss. Inside, old weapons still functioned. "We built these to stop the end," she said. "Now they're all that's left to defend the living." The Othani watched, stunned, as Alara began preparing for a fight that had waited 2 centuries. The machines, once silent, now stood tall under the darkening sky, their weapons aimed upward. And far above them, the curtain of darkness in space finally began to move slowly, curling into shape, forming what looked like long arms reaching for the planet. The first of them had arrived. Not ships. Not creatures. Something in between. Made of metal and shadow, shaped by forgotten science and hunger for silence. Alara looked up as the sky cracked with black lightning. "They're here," she whispered, "and they've come to finish what they started." The skies above Eden 9 turned black. Not from clouds or storms, but from something worse, something alive and cold and ancient. The Othani crew, now hardened by fear, watched from their command posts as the first shapes moved above the upper atmosphere. They had no clear form, only shifting outlines like smoke trapped in armor, their presence bending light and silence around them. These were not invaders in the way the galaxy knew them. They were exterminators, designed not just to kill, but to erase every trace of life and memory from a place. They came slowly, with no rush, as if certain of their victory. But what they didn't know, what they had never expected, was that they had awakened more than one storm. Alara Miles stood before the reactivated defense systems of Eden 9, her body wrapped in a half-repaired Terran exosuit she had rebuilt with the help of Othani engineers. Around her, the giant walking machines, ancient Terran war drones, now stood ready, humming with quiet power, their rusted frames groaning like beasts waking from a deep slumber. The Othani soldiers and scientists, once only explorers, had begun to move with purpose, transformed by the grim knowledge that their lives and perhaps their entire civilization might depend on what happened in the next few hours. Alara moved among them, not shouting orders, but giving calm, clear instructions. "We don't fight to win," she said softly. "We fight to survive. We hurt them. We slow them. That's all we can do until help arrives, if it arrives." High above, the enemy began to descend, forming long black trails as they entered the atmosphere like shards of night falling from the sky. They made no sound, no roar or scream, just a deep pressure that seemed to push down on every mind, making some tremble, others freeze. Alara had warned them of this. "They press against your thoughts," she had said. "Not with words, but with weight. If you feel fear rising, hold on to anything real: your name, your purpose, your home." The first strike came without warning. One of the Othani patrol towers vanished in a flash of blue light, not destroyed but unmade, as if it had never been built. The crew inside was gone, no bodies, no signal, just absence. Panic surged, but Alara immediately activated the old Terran turrets, and the sky lit up with streams of plasma fire. To the crew's shock, one of the shadow figures actually burst apart under the impact, not silently, but with a wailing sound that felt like the air itself was screaming. "They're not invincible," Alara said through the command channel. "We built weapons to reach their core. Aim for the distortion field where the light bends." The defense machines responded like old soldiers answering a forgotten call. Their heavy limbs moved with slow power, but their aim was precise. Each blast they fired created moments of chaos in the enemy formation, breaking their perfect silence with sudden bursts of color and energy. The Othani, though frightened, began to believe they had a chance, however small. But hope was fragile, and the enemy adapted quickly. Soon, more of the black shapes split into smaller, faster forms, gliding low over the terrain and attacking the sensor stations. One by one, the Othani began losing visibility. "They're trying to blind us," shouted one of the technicians. Alara didn't panic. Instead, she called out, "Switch to thermal mapping and seismic data. They can hide from light, but not from heat or pressure." The ship's AI adjusted, and once again they could see, not with eyes, but with shapes and echoes. The battle began to shift. More Terran weapons were activated, including mines buried long ago. Each time the enemy approached too closely, the ground erupted in sudden, controlled bursts of force, and for the first time, the Othani saw pieces of the shadow creatures scattered like ash on the wind. Still, the cost was rising. Eden 9 shook with tremors, both from the battle and from the damage being done to its surface. Alora knew they couldn't hold forever. In the command bunker, she inserted the beacon core into a long dead relay node and powered it up. It glowed weakly, as if unsure it wanted to work after all this time. The signal it would send wasn't just a distress call. It was a key, a code from the last days of Terran command, one that could unlock hidden bases, lost fleets, or even buried secrets humanity had left behind. "If anyone's out there," Alora whispered as she activated it, "this is your storm. Come home." The moment the beacon fired, the enemy reacted violently. Every black shape in the sky turned sharply toward its signal, howling in a soundless wave of motion. They didn't move like ships, they moved like anger, rushing toward the source. But Alara had planned for this. Around the beacon's location, she had rigged the oldest and most powerful defense weapons they had found, massive pulse cannons designed to overheat and self-destruct after one firing. As the creatures closed in, the cannons lit up and released a final burst of devastating light, slicing through the enemy lines and buying the Lucent Dawn precious minutes. In those minutes, Captain Noro initiated the final phase of their planned retreat, not out of cowardice, but to regroup and signal others. The ship lifted from the surface, covered in ash and wounded in parts, but still able to fly. Alara stayed behind with a small crew, guarding the relay until the last second. Then she too was pulled aboard by a drone, just before the final defense station exploded in a blinding blast that shook the sky. As the Lucent Dawn fled into the upper atmosphere, the crew watched the battlefield fade behind them, now covered in smoke and broken light. "Was it enough?" Noro asked. Alora didn't answer right away. She looked out the viewport, eyes focused far beyond what they could see. "We made noise," she said. "And if any Terran echoes still remain in this galaxy, they'll hear it." Just then, the sensors picked up something strange, a signal, weak and old, coming from deep space. It was human, and it was responding. The stars outside the Lucent Dawn shimmered with a strange light, no longer distant and peaceful, but alive with tension. Something had answered the beacon. A signal, unmistakably human, had responded with a pulse that carried not just data but memory, a signature from the old war days, a forgotten code embedded deep in Terran systems, buried so long that even Alara Miles had to pause and check its meaning twice. It wasn't a command or a location. It was a name. Fort Ashen Sky. A fallback station once thought lost, hidden near a red dwarf system across the void, a place where last-generation Deathworlders had once regrouped before the final collapse. For Alara, it was like a ghost calling her back. As the Lucent Dawn adjusted its course and jumped through a fractured part of space, the crew waited in silence, eyes heavy with fear and hope. No one knew what they would find, not even Alara. But they knew something had survived, something old and human, something that remembered war in a way no one else did. The journey through folded space was rough. Static surged through the ship, strange echoes flickered across the hull, and once again, the enemy's whispering signals tried to break in. But this time, the crew was ready. They blocked the interference, sealed systems, and trusted Alara's instructions like scripture. When they emerged from the fold, the scene before them was both terrifying and beautiful. The red dwarf star glowed weakly over a ruined planet, ringed with the remains of broken satellites and scorched ships. But among the wreckage, one structure still pulsed with light: Fort Ashen Sky. A great station, half buried in a crater, still alive after centuries, running on deep core fusion, its shields flickering but present. Alara stared at it for a long time before speaking. "They survived," she whispered. "Not all of them, maybe not many, but enough." As they approached, the station opened communication. It was deep, steady, and human. "Identify." Alara stepped forward and gave her designation, Captain Alara Miles. Terran Defense Corps. Cryo recovered, Eden 9. Beacon 49A was triggered. "Is this command still active?" A pause. Then, the voice returned, slower this time. Command acknowledged. You're late. The doors of Fort Ashen Sky opened like a mouth in stone. Inside, they found a mix of old and new. Machines ran on patched systems, humans in faded uniforms moved through dim corridors, and AI units older than the Othani race walked the halls beside flesh-and-bone soldiers. These were not people who had lived well, they were people who had endured. Scarred, silent, watchful. They saluted Alara not out of habit, but recognition. She was one of them. A survivor of the Burning Edge. Alara explained what had happened, how the enemy had returned, how Eden 9 had been attacked, how the Othani had helped fight. At first, the older Terrans listened without emotion, but as she described the fight, the defense drones, and the final signal, something changed in their eyes. "We thought we were the last," said one of the commanders. "We stayed hidden. We thought making noise would bring them back. But maybe it's time they found out we're still here." Plans formed quickly after that. Fort Ashen Sky was not just a shelter, it was a vault. It held weapons not used since the last stand, ships designed for suicide missions, and blueprints for things that had never been built. The Terrans had waited, hidden, not because they had given up, but because they had been preparing. Alara asked to take one of the old warships, the Iron Requiem. It was massive, half alive, its hull made from the bones of fallen colonies, its systems barely functional but still holding a charge. The Terran command agreed. "If the fight is starting again," the commander said, "then let the galaxy remember what Deathworlders can do." The Othani crew worked side by side with the Terrans, learning from them, adapting, fixing. Suspicion slowly became respect. Alara stood in the bridge of the Iron Requiem, staring at the void ahead, her thoughts sharp. She had slept barely an hour in the past week, but her mind was focused. The enemy would not stop. The signal had gone out. Others might come. But now they had something the enemy had never expected: unity. Not just Terrans, not just Othani, but both, standing together. A new alliance forged in the ashes of an old war. As they prepared for launch, something strange happened. Across different systems, small Terran signals began to respond to old bases, AI drones, scout ships that had hidden in deep space. They had heard the same signal, and one by one they answered. Not all with words. Some sent battle logs, others sent coordinates, some sent nothing but heartbeat pings. But they were alive. Alara watched the data scroll across the screen. A ghost network was waking. A buried fleet, long forgotten, now pulsing like embers beneath cold ash. The Iron Requiem lifted from the broken moon and turned toward the stars. Alara sent one final message to the galaxy. "We were not wiped out. We were waiting. And now we're coming back. You erased our worlds. You silenced our history. But Deathworlders don't vanish. We endure. We adapt. And when the time comes, we strike back." As the ship entered the void, the crew saw a distant flicker of light on the long-range sensors. A dark mass was moving again. The enemy had tracked them. But this time, the humans would not run. The sky darkened, but the Terran warship burned brighter. And in that moment, across distant stars, civilizations who had thought humanity extinct felt something stir in their bones, fear for some, hope for others. Because legends had spoken of the Deathworlders. And now they were real again.